Welcome, welcome, welcome to our session number 2 for our agripreneurship program, helping us disrupt the food and agriculture world. And today we have a very special guest, Nick, the founder of V2. Nick, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well. Very well. This evening in Sydney,
Good.
Australia.
Amazing, amazing. I'm 2 hours behind, so to me, there's still sunshine here in Indonesia, and you're logging in from Australia, I'm guessing. Nick, how did you come up with the idea? Like, I saw your journey, like you've come from different industries, but you're so also in the food space. So, how did you come up with the idea of V2?
Yeah, no, I've worked in food most of my career as an R&D director for big food multinationals like
I
Mars and
saw that.
PepsiCo. And I'd actually left PepsiCo and I was working as an academic teaching innovation. So we created a degree called Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation. I was teaching and I was consulting to the meat industry and to the CSIRO around innovation strategy. And I was asked actually by the CSIRO, would I consider doing a piece of work to look at this plant-based meat phenomenon that was happening abroad and answer the question whether or not we could do something about this in Australia, and is there an opportunity? So I actually was asked to take a look at it, and then after about a month of looking at what was happening and doing some work, I went back and said, look, this is a thing, this is really important, and I want to set up a business to do this. So that was in about January 2019. And we raised some seed money from the CSIRO venture capital fund called Main Sequence. And I went off to San Francisco to go to a big conference to find out about alternative protein. And that was when V2 started. It was really a really strange journey. I've never done anything like this before. But this is my life now, and totally committed to making it happen.
But it's interesting because if you start connecting the dots from like having worked in a big food business to doing research, and I think that's what life is about. Because a lot of people come to me and they're like, can you give me a really good business idea? And it's all of these paths and these doors that open along the way. But the more we do what we love, the more knowledge we'll get. And you never know who's going to open the next door for you. So it's always about being open towards opportunity, but realizing that no matter what experience you've gone through, whether it's good or bad, it will eventually all connect the dots, like if it's done for you, right? That you're just going like, I don't know how this happened, magically happened. And when I was scrolling through LinkedIn, I'm like, I can see this happening. But you were a resilient leader. They were doing what you loved and disrupting and looking at things from different angles. And tell us about food, because food, I mean, everyone's talking about technology, disruption, artificial intelligence, crypto, NFT, but a lot of people forget about the importance of foods. What is
Yeah,
happening in the food space? Because the supply chain, but also we had a team, they won second best idea. So they didn't win first, but it was a group of girls in India and they were building plant-based meat with the same benefits as real meat, because that's a big thing that they had in India, being like the most vegetarian country in the world. So what are some opportunities that you're seeing in the space of eating healthy? Because a lot of people are talking about like access to food, but we know that some food that makes it to the table have intoxication because they've been irrigated with the wrong water, or there's too much sugar or pesticide. So what is happening in that space, and how is V2 like disrupting the world of balancing the diets, the supply chains, pollution? Because sometimes when you fix a problem, we unfortunately create another, right? Which becomes another big.
Paula, you're going to have to let me answer a question because you've yeah, I think you've asked me 7 in one sentence. So look, disruption. So a few things about food. It's very traditional. We don't
Yep.
like change. You eat what your mum taught you to eat. That's a kind of a human condition. We're not actually very adventurous. Yeah, so we could say, well, we'll save the planet by giving people space food or whatever. Well, we're not. We want the same food that our mums ate. There's another thing that's going on in food, which is to do how we're genetically wired. Yeah, we are wired to like certain things, and normally the things that we like have a nutritional payoff. The trouble is that how our brains are wired was when we were hunter-gatherers. And what was a nutritional payoff 10,000 years ago? Like, see some honey, eat it, because that's calories, and you need calories because you're starving. That's basically the human condition for most of our evolution,
Yeah.
or something that's really fatty, or something that's like meat. You know, if there is a dead animal, you eat it because that gives you iron, it gives you protein, and it's something which you would be really looking for in your diet. Now, you wind the clock forward to today, and actually you've got sort of twin problems of sort of obesity and malnutrition, and you also have got 10 billion of the hunter-gatherers that were 2 million, you know, in the beginning of our evolution. Now there's 10 billion of us, and we still like to eat the same things. We're still wired in the same way. And certainly from our perspective, and because we make plant-based meat, when you do the maths on our meat consumption, if you gave us free rein to eat all the meat that we would like to eat, everyone would be eating the same amount of meat as we eat in Australia, which is like 100 kilos of meat per person per year. If you multiply that by the 10 billion people population, you have no land left. Not just no land left. You would need another planet of land to grow the crops to feed the animals that we will be eating. It is just completely impossible. So, and the reason for that is it's quite inefficient to make meat from animals. You know, it takes 10 or 20 kilos of feedstock to make a kilo of meat. Now, I make 2 kilos of meat from a kilo of feedstock, so I'm like 40 times more efficient than a cow. So that is the problem, the existential problem that we're solving. And you talk about disruption in food, and I've been trying to innovate most of my career in food and in Mars and PepsiCo. The reality is actually people have very simple desires. You know, what good food hasn't really changed very much. And so in a way, our job is to make plant-based meat that's kind of almost boring. It's just got to work in the recipe that you like to cook. So if your favorite food in Australia, it will be spaghetti bolognese, I guess, or it might be a pie or something like that. We have to produce meat that works in those recipes. And in the Philippines, it'll be something completely different. In the US, it's likely to be a burger, but there's no point in trying to sell burgers in China because they don't eat burgers. In fact, you'd better do pork, not beef, because so that's kind of how we think about it. And
it must be very challenging for you in Australia then, because we're so multicultural. Because as you're speaking of the different types of meats, I could think of like the curry, the Thai, like salads with beef. So we're so cuisines. How have you guys overcome this challenge, or have you used as an MVP market?
Yeah, I mean, most dishes contain meat. You know, it's when we were founded, it was the 17th of January 2019, and at the same day, and as pure serendipity, the Eat Lancet report was published. And what that was the first major report that kind of combined what should we eat from a nutrition perspective. So what should the human population eat to be our best selves from a nutrition perspective within the planetary boundaries. So it kind of combined sustainability with nutrition. And the answer was something like, well, we should eat meat, but maybe only 14 grams a day. And then I go into my recipe books and I'm looking for which recipe has got take 14 grams of meat. And it's like, it's a tiny little bit. They don't exist, you know, but that's all we're kind of allowed to eat. So our job is just to make meat that works in the recipes that you like to eat. And it's little bit boring. We're not trying to make something that tastes like space food. And the reason is because we design things for humans kind of the way they are, not for humans the way we would like us to be. We're just the same sort of dumb animals, if you like, that we were 10,000 years ago. But the difference is there's going to be 10 billion of us, and we're destroying the planet. So that's the change that's got to happen. And our job is to design food that works for the planet and for our own nutrition.
Talking about evolution, how has been your evolution from having worked in the corporate world to then the academic world, which is almost like 180 degrees, to then probably flipping? I don't know how many times your brain would have to flip to become an entrepreneur.
It's careers make no sense. So I'm 50. God, I don't know how old I am now. 57 or something. So my career has only makes sense when you look backwards, but going forwards, it was all over the place. So I started my career as an aerospace engineer, and And then I moved into food and manufacturing, and then I ended up in R&D in food. And I guess the theme behind it was technology. I've always been a geek. I've always read every encyclopedia. Everything interests me. I am a complete polymath. I studied engineering at Cambridge. I did my master's in manufacturing engineering at Cambridge. But I am interested in everything, whether it's art, music, design, every subject. I studied every subject I could, and that's kind of been the theme in my life. So it wasn't, none of these were really big changes. So moving from manufacturing to R&D, well, I was in manufacturing, but I was working in Mars and I was changing lots of things. So the R&D director said, oh, you should be in R&D. Moving through different countries, that was because I love different countries. I want to live in different countries. And going into academia, well, I was an R&D director. So I was working with academia a lot. I was working with universities. I was interested in technology. And so leaving PepsiCo, and there was an opportunity to work in innovation. I was thinking a lot about innovation. I was trying to do it most of my life. So it seems to be the perfect opportunity to try and teach innovation and try and figure out how to understand what I'd learned empirically, I guess, through my career. So it all makes perfect sense, but actually careers really make no sense. And you just sort of take opportunities as they come along, and the things that interest you and the things that you think, well, maybe I could do that.
And if you could go back to day one of V2, yes, everything's connected and you opened a business without even realizing that you were on this journey. What advice would you give yourself? And yes, we can learn from our mistakes and everything's worth it. But what advice, like if you could sit and be like, Nick, let's have a conversation. What conversation would you have with yourself in 2019?
I honestly wouldn't give myself any advice. I think the advantage of a startup entrepreneur, and I've never been an entrepreneur, but the best thing about an entrepreneur is that they're stupid. They have got no idea of the problems that they're going to come across. And to be honest, if I had advised me 3.5 years ago that I was going to be facing all the problems that I did face, and as we built the business, all of the hard work and everything, I probably wouldn't have done it. I would have just stayed an academic and done some consulting, and life would have been a lot easier. But there's something about being naive that's actually very useful. And Steve Jobs sort of said it. It's like this idea that you're foolish, but it's not stupid, just foolish, like you don't know enough to know that something can't be done. Yeah. And that's the most valuable thing that an entrepreneur has, is they don't actually, if you're experienced and you're in the industry, then you know that something doesn't work because it's obvious. Otherwise, someone would have done it. Well, when you come in from the outside, you don't know that. You just assume that that you know better than someone else, and so you give it a go, and who knows, you might actually get there. So
it's almost like the more you know, the less you know, right? The more you start becoming an expert, the more obsessed you become, and you're like, oh my God, there's so many more things for us to be working, and not just in the product itself, but it's on managing teams and finding the right investors, on scalability and so forth. Talk about scalability. What are your goals with V2? So what's next? As in country-wise, or flavors, or B2B?
So scalable. There is no point in doing. We've set our mission as trying to make a difference globally to the planet. So there is no point in us setting up a business which is not scalable. So I've really thought hard about how we make our product and how could we scale globally really quickly, because saving sustainability is not one of those things that we've got. We've got decades to fix it. We have a vanishingly short amount of time to make a really big difference. So we've deliberately sort of figured out how to create our meat in a way that I could go into any country effectively, and we could scale rapidly in pretty much any market in the world. And that's actually not, you don't just design product, you design your production system, you design your route to market, you think through how are you going to get it to consumers. And certainly in this game, it's about speed. So there's a lot of things that I don't want to reinvent. I actually want to use the meat industry, for example. I mean, my biggest partners are the meat industry. I will work with the meat industry, which is kind of interesting because most CEOs, and this is kind of the secret here, most CEOs of alternative protein companies are vegans. And I'm not a vegan. So I don't eat a lot of meat now, but it's not about being a vegan. It's actually about just reducing your animal meat consumption so that you stay
And they've
within
already got the channels to sell. So if you partner with them.
Yeah, and look, who am I targeting? I'm targeting the 99% of the world that aren't vegan. Most people in the world aren't vegan, so they're the ones who got the problem. Actually, the vegans have already solved the problem. They don't eat meat. I don't actually need to. I make their lives a lot easier because now they can buy V2, and they can cook, and they have much more delicious meals that are a lot more affordable than they had before. So they're very thankful, and I'm very thankful for them for buying our product. But I'm after the 99% in Australia who aren't vegan, but they're a bit worried about their diet and they're a bit worried about the planet. And my job is to make it easy for them. So that means it's got to be totally delicious and it's got to be affordable. I mean, meat's expensive. So why would you pay more for plant-based beef? So we're the first brand globally that's actually cheaper than beef. And that's really important because there's nowhere in the world that this movement's going to happen if you're going to be paying double the price of beef. So if you go and buy a Whopper, a Rebel Whopper and you can buy them in the Philippines, they should be priced the same as the Whopper. And that's important for us. And we've designed it that way. We really do not want to be more expensive than beef because otherwise we're not going to have an impact on the planet.
And talking about disruption, how are you guys disrupting, like when it comes to like digital marketing? What have you guys seen? Because what I see a lot in the space of entrepreneurship is there's very talented people with a vision like yours that are able to create the amazing product at the right price. But I see that a huge challenge that we have in the Philippines and today in Indonesia is you've got a lot of creativity on the product, but then they struggle to enter the market and to scale because you have the best product, but if you're not marketing effectively. So what have you guys used as the marketing channels that you've contributed to your success?
Yeah, so I mean, we do digital, but what I did was I recruited people. Luckily, I'm old enough to actually have a network, so I could recruit people. And through your career, you come across people who you notice, oh, they're quite good. You know, you clock them during your career. And I've actually assembled a whole lot of people who I've noticed through my career who were really, really good at what they did. And some of them are marketeers, and they were the best marketeers that I'd seen either selling a PepsiCo product or Mars, or I'd come across them and they were the best that there is. And so those are the people I went to and say, you know how to sell, you know how to market food. And digital is part of it, but actually there's a lot of things about marketing food. And a lot of it is food is quite impulsive. You go into a supermarket, you see something, and it's got to ping. You've got to see it, otherwise you won't buy it. So there's a lot around packaging, about where you are in the shelf, and how do you stand out. So it's kind of hard-won marketing lessons which people have learned over decades. But I mean, depending on which market we'll go, we'll use the tools that are normal in that market. We're not actually innovating too much from a marketing perspective. We'll use digital. I mean, we do use socials quite a lot. There's quite a lot of sort of people who endorse our products, or a lot of that is not actually paid by us. It's actually people who genuinely like it, and then they Instagram it, and then they show their recipes, and we can amplify some of that. So there's a little bit of that, but actually we're not trying to break the rules on marketing. We're actually staying quite close to the
simple samples. They always work. The samples in supermarkets.
It's food. I mean, look, it's got to look delicious, and you've got to taste it. And if it's slightly different, the only way to get people over the line is by tasting it. So a lot of sampling, which was pretty much impossible to do in COVID. So yeah, our journey was very interesting because actually through our whole growth, it's all through COVID. So we've had to pivot. We've had to pivot so many times because of COVID. Just stopped us doing what we were planning on doing.
And what tips? So most of our learners that are logging in today and are going to be watching the recordings in the next couple of days as well, they're first-time entrepreneurs. A lot of them come from developing countries, and a lot of them will have families in the agriculture space. With sometimes, unfortunately, limited access to internet resources, what advice do you have for them to stay resilient, find the purpose, and make sure that they're progressing every day? Because as you said, like there's challenges, you went through the COVID as a challenge, but you can also see it as an opportunity. So what advice do you have for first-time entrepreneurs that are studying the bachelor degree, they want to change the world?
Well, first of all, look, I'm not the normal startup. I'm old, I've actually done a lot of years. And so it's quite unusual actually. When I was in an incubator, and we were in Sydney, there's one called Fishburners. There's a number of them. And I was with, maybe there were like 300 people all doing their startups. And I was the only sort of old guy, it was actually all 20 somethings. But there's an advantage in being old. I've actually learned a few things. What I would say is that it's very risky. You will fail. The chances are you will fail. The chances are you won't make much money, certainly in the first months or first years. So don't give up the day job would be my first advice. Because you've got to give yourself a bit of room. If everything that you've got is counting on this one idea that's got to be a success, the pressure you put yourself under is intense, and it probably will lead to the wrong result, because you'll probably go for something which is not the best idea, but it's the one that you can do with the resources you've got. So give yourself some freedom, free to experiment, try some things. When I was teaching innovation, and I've got a fair track record of innovations that I've brought to the world, and it's like, where did you get that idea from? And the reality is I'm probably thinking about 50 ideas in any given time. And then the context changes. And then now the time is right for that idea. But I maybe have been thinking about it or been curious about the tension, the consumer tension, or there's something wrong about that, or there's something like, why are we doing that way? And then an opportunity arises where now I've got the solution for the problem, and it's right in front of you. There is a problem, you've got the solution. But you might have been thinking about it for 20 years, and I reckon I've got another sort of 50 ideas, and maybe the time will come, and maybe that's because society needs to change, or maybe I just need to be in the right place in the right time with the right partners to solve the problem. So don't have one idea, have lots of them. And you don't know which is the one that's gonna be the right one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also around prioritizing, right? Because we just, as entrepreneurs, everything sparks a little light bulb around us with opportunities, but it's just going, what's realistic, what's the right time, and what is doable according to what we have.
Yeah, cool. And try it and then fail, and just accept you try it and you get the results, and it's a terrible idea, and you go, okay, that's all right, I've got another 49. It's fine.
Yeah. And it's interesting that with entrepreneurs, like we get excited about the challenge, and the more you fail, the more you get closer to your goal. Unlike a lot of other like people in the corporate world, like you're sometimes not allowed to fail as much, but when you're an entrepreneur, you are. And I find it with an entrepreneur, we're so busy on innovating and finding solutions and just like go mode that we sometimes forget to celebrate the wins. Look at your win. In 3 years, look at what you've achieved. I see your brand everywhere when I'm in Australia. And it's just like, look at it. You started like less than a year before like lockdown, and you're like this huge success. So I think one message that I love to share with everyone that's watching us today is maybe at the end of the day, just write down one thing that you're grateful for that you achieved today, because little by little we are achieving a lot, but it doesn't feel like it because you've got so many ideas. There's so many challenges that you're working on your head or in the community or launching and testing it out. So I think a huge part is just also acknowledging these little wins that we all have every day. And maybe the little win is just the fact that you haven't given up on your idea, because every idea has opportunity of succeeding if you're tweaking it and listening to the market and always evolving and disrupting. So Nick,
I'm gonna write that down, Paula, because it's funny, I don't regard us as a success at all, because I'm looking at well, have we changed the planet? And we're not even 1% of meat in Australia. So we might be the biggest brand in Australia, and but success is where we are in every country, and we've halted the growth in meat consumption globally. but you're right. It's tough if you don't give yourself little wins along the way. It's a pretty tough road. So I'll make a little note to myself to celebrate.
I think it's a combination of having like goals every day. So it's like, what is my goal for today? And at the end of the day, going, even if you haven't achieved 100% of your goal, but you're just knowing that you're progressing towards it. And I see that as an entrepreneur, because we've got so many ideas, like you're saying, there's so many opportunities, there's so many things that we're innovating, there's so many challenges. But if you don't have a goal, you can't focus. And when you have a goal, you're able to focus, but you're also able to acknowledge this little extra step that we've taken. And people think that innovation and entrepreneurship are these big wins, but the reality is that there's these little micro wins that hopefully we have on an hourly basis. And a lot of them come from mistakes that we've made, right?
Yeah, and we do that. I mean, look, we're winning in Australia. We call it our developed market playbook. But what is that? That's actually just an experiment. So Australia is a playbook for us to then take that playbook and we can go into other Western markets. So we can then go into the US or we can go to Europe. So everything we do is almost like an experiment to get us to the next thing. And I've got other experiments like in emerging markets, like in Africa. I've got an experiment running at the moment and it's really exciting. And because we think that we can challenge that whole wet market thing, we can do something there, and that's super exciting. And then I've got an Asian playbook, and then there's a whole set of other experiments that we're doing on the technology that, some of them don't work, but if they do, then I know that will access another type of product that might be important. So yeah, it's just fun. It's a playground experimenting in trying to solve the problem, and every time we get something, yes, we'll do a little dance and we're ready to go and take that forward into the next idea.
Yeah, so good. And another big part is like collaborating, right? For you to enter all of these markets, we need to be networking and collaborating with brands. Talking about collaboration, Nick, and for everyone that's watching, next week our guest will be Dennis, who is a serial entrepreneur. He was born in one of the most entrepreneurial families of the Philippines. And right now he's a director of the Department of Agriculture. So I super recommend you guys should log in. And Nick, if you want, I can make an introduction because Dennis has the biggest heart and biggest network you'll ever meet.
Love to meet you.
So send me an email and then Well and I will put you in touch, and I'll send you his personal WhatsApp as well, because he will definitely open all of the doors for you over in the Philippines and many other countries. Really famous as well in Hong Kong and Indonesia. He's got all of the connections there. So yes, and that's what entrepreneurship is about. Us helping each other succeed so we can continuously do what we love and create this positive impact. So thank you, Nick, for sharing your journey with us. I love what you do. I was born vegetarian, not because of the trend and not just because of sustainability. I've always loved my vegetables. I remember even as a child, like I'd hang out with my friends after school and my friends' parents would be like, what do you want for lunch? I'd be like, oh, broccoli, spinach, lettuce. My mom would receive phone calls from the parents going like, what have you done with your daughters? You didn't ask for like fast food. And mom's just like, that's Paula. So yeah, so thank you for existing. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. Very needed, very delicious. And yeah, we wish you all of the success in the world and hope to see you again to share more of your growth. Hopefully in the next, we can hear more about you conquering more countries and more.
Yeah, and get our product in the Philippines. You can get it I think you can get it in Burger King. But we're looking at the Philippines. We'll definitely be in the Philippines. You'll be able to buy V2 meat in the Philippines.
Amazing. I'm over in the Philippines in 3 weeks. If there's anything I can do for you there, let me know. You can count on us. We're part of your community for now and forever. Thank you, Nick. Big hugs. Cool. And we'll see you. Big hugs. Ciao. Thanks, Nick. Bye.